I'd like to call this meeting to order. The August 22nd meeting of the Iowa City Board of Adjustment. First order of business is the roll call.
Baker.
Yes, you did.
Oh, did you say Baker?
Yep. Baker.
The hearing aids, too. Here.
Carlson. Parker. Parker. Russo.
Here.
Swigert.
Here.
Okay. First thing I have to do before every meeting is read a statement. Relax. This will take a while. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body created by the City of Iowa City according to state statutes. The board's purpose is to decide on applications for variances from the zoning ordinance, appeals of decisions of city officials, and applications for special exceptions requested under the zoning ordinance. Board of Adjustment is an independent volunteer board made up of Iowa City residents and is not part of the city administration. We are assisted in our work by the city attorney's office and by planning staff. Prior to this meeting, board members received the materials submitted by the applicants, the staff reports reviewing the application, and any correspondence submitted by members of the public. Board members have not discussed the application or its merit with each other, staff, the applicant, or any other member of the public in advance of this meeting. All consideration and discussion by the board takes place in open meeting here tonight, where we also have an opportunity to hear from the public. Board bases its decisions on facts and evidence allowed by city code presented in open meeting. Concise and truthful testimony helps us a great deal in our decision making. We ask that if you wish to speak, that you come to the podium, print your name and address on the sign-in sheet, and speak clearly into the microphone so your testimony can be heard by all present and by our minute taker, as all testimony becomes part of the public record. We ask that the proceedings be orderly and that when you are testifying, you address your remarks to the board. If this meeting becomes lengthy, we may ask that testimony be focused on new facts or on information not already presented. The order of proceedings for each application will be an oral report by staff summarizing the issues of the case and staff's recommendations, an opportunity for the applicant to speak, an opportunity for any interested party to speak for or against the application, an opportunity for final statements and arguments by the applicant and staff. The board will discuss the issues and evidence, state its findings, and vote on a motion. Motions are always made in the affirmative. First order of business tonight is special exception item EXC 24-0003, an application submitted by Harvest Preserve Foundation Incorporated requesting a special exception to allow a religious private group assembly use in the interim development single-family residential IDRS zone at 1645 North Scott Boulevard, EXC 240003. And before we, I'm going to open the public discussion, and then Mark has to make a statement. So this public hearing is now open.
Good evening. I just wanted to state for the record that I consulted with the city attorney about a possible conflict of interest involving myself and a principal of this project. It turns out that it's not considered a legal conflict. However, then it falls upon my judgment as to whether or not I think I can be fair and impartial in assessing, the outcome of this hearing, and I believe I can. So with that.
Ask what the conflict that you might have presented for was.
Yes, you should explain the conflict.
Yes, I'm a supplier of materials to a project for Bedrock Builders in Kelowna. Okay, and that's the extent of my involvement with them. And I think both of us were surprised by seeing each other here tonight. So at any rate, I thought it was important to put that out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this issue? If not, Parker, if you'd please give us the staff report.
Yep. Will the minute taker please note that Board Member Parker is in attendance via Zoom? As the chair mentioned, Bryce, can we do a mic check quick?
Of course.
Okay.
I'm
Thanks.
here.
As the chair mentioned, tonight we'll be going over an application submitted by Harvest Preserve Foundation. This is an application requesting a special exception to allow a religious and private group assembly use in an interim development single-family residential zone at 1645 North Scott Boulevard. Shown here is a location map of the property, and although there is approximately 100 acres of land here on this property, the project area we'll be going over tonight is located up in this northeast corner. Next, we have a zoning map showing residential property to the west and to the south, and the remaining surrounding properties are zoned IDRS. The Harvest Preserve Foundation, Inc. was established in 2005 as a nonprofit corporation, and the preserve is dedicated to maintaining and preserving natural areas while also increasing public awareness, appreciation, and participation. The preserve maintains approximately 100 acres of land that has been placed within a conservation easement to achieve their mission, the primary use of this land being parks and open space. The conservation easement also outlines buildable areas that are suitable for construction of allowed development, and the applicant is seeking to construct a meeting space that provides members with the opportunities for education and shelter with year-round restrooms. This use is classified as private group assembly. Shown here is the site plan and application we'll be going over tonight. And I just want to clarify that the Good Neighbor meeting held in May of this year and correspondence reflects where the applicant initially proposed to construct the building, which is up in this northwest corner of the property. And the current application before the board has been revised in an effort to try to answer some of those concerns, and the building has been moved to where we see it now. Staff has not received additional correspondence since the site revision. Looking at the floor plans of the building, here's floor 1, and this would be the main assembly area of the building. Next, we have the basement, and this would be a 1-story with a walkout, so there would be access shown here from the basement. The Board of Adjustment is charged with approving with conditions, or denying the application based on the facts presented. To approve the special exception, the board must find that it meets all applicable approval criteria. Beginning with the specific standards of religious and private group assembly in the IDRS zones. Starting with criteria A, the following setbacks are required in lieu of the setbacks specified in the base zone, and those requirements are front and side setback of 20 feet and a rear setback of 50 feet. The proposed project and building location proposes a front lot setback of 181 feet and a side setback of more than 181 feet. The side setback to the west would be 778 feet, and to the south, more than 2,750 feet. So the applicant is proposing to meet and exceed all of the minimum requirements. Criteria B. The proposed use will be designed to be compatible with adjacent uses. The Board of Adjustment will consider aspects of the proposed use such as site size, type of accessory uses, anticipated traffic, building scale, setbacks, landscaping, and location and amount of paved areas. The Board of Adjustment may deny the use or aspects of the use that are deemed out of scale, incompatible, or out of character with surrounding residential uses, or may require additional measures to mitigate these differences, such as requiring screening, landscaping, pedestrian facilities, setbacks, location and design of parking facilities, and buildings. This use would provide an indoor meeting space and restrooms for its members for the purpose of educations, trainings, leisure, shelter, and because it is a private group assembly, it is primarily used for its members, and that would mean it's restricted access to the general public, and this space cannot be rented out for commercial office uses or events for the general public. The proposed design of the building is compatible with adjacent uses. It's 60 feet by 40 feet, or 2,400 square feet, and is 1-story with a walkout basement. The nearest residential use is a 2-story with a footprint of 2,242 square feet and a total floor area of approximately 4,400 square feet. Transportation staff has reviewed and determined that the proposed use and associated traffic will not overburden Scott Boulevard, stating that the street currently carries approximately 5,100 vehicles per day, and theoretically the capacity would exceed 15,000 vehicles per day. Transportation staff also determined that the use and existing parking spaces will not generate enough traffic to warrant further improvements to Scott Boulevard, such as turn lanes or a traffic study. The occupant load of the main auditorium in the building, which was shown in that earlier floor plan, is what we use to determine the off-street parking requirement. That occupancy is 125 people and would require 21 parking spaces. Criteria C. Given that large parking lots can seriously erode the single-family residential character of these zones, the board will carefully review any parking spaces beyond the minimum required. The board may limit the number of parking spaces and the size and location of parking lots, taking into account the availability of on-street parking, the estimated parking demand, and opportunities for shared parking with other non-residential uses in the vicinity. The proposed use does require 21 parking spaces, and again, this is calculated based on the largest room in the building, and we take 1/6 of that number, which is 125, and that's how we get to 21 parking spaces required. The property contains an existing paved area capable of being striped for these required 21 spaces, so no new pavement or parking areas are proposed as part of this application. For bike parking, it will be required, and that's something we will review further at site plan review. And there is no on-street parking available along North Scott Boulevard. The nearest on-street parking would be along Tamarack Trail, which is 26 feet of pavement width, and that size of street would support parking along one side. Criteria D. The proposed use will not have significant adverse effects on the livability of nearby residential uses due to noise, glare from lights, late-night operations, odors, or litter. The closest residential property line from the proposed use is located 778 feet to the west, and it is separated by existing woodlands. To ensure the use does not proceed or produce negative impacts relating to noise or late-night operations, staff recommends a condition that the building housing the private group assembly use be closed from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and that amplified sound not be allowed outside. Single-family and IDRS zones are in the low illumination district, which is the lowest lighting district within our code. However, the IDRS zone properties are not subject to the same lighting restrictions as single-family uses, and due to the proximity to existing single-family uses, the specific approval criteria that the use be designed to be compatible with adjacent uses, staff does recommend the condition that any future lighting be subject to the standards of 14.5G3, standards related to single-family and two-family uses to ensure compatible lighting designs. Criteria E. The building official may grant approval for the following modifications to a private group assembly without approval from the Board of Adjustment, and that would include an accessory storage building of 500 square feet or less, or a building addition of 500 square feet or less. This section is not applicable because this is a new application and new development. If the proposed use is located in a residential zone or in the central planning district, it must comply with the multifamily site development standards. This property is not within a residential zone or within the central planning district, so these standards do not apply. Next, moving on to the general standards. Starting with 1, the specific proposed exception will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, comfort, or general welfare. The proposed building will generally be of comparable scale to the surrounding residential uses, and the applicant proposes an increased setback to maintain separation from existing development. The proposed use is classified as private group assembly, so as mentioned, this is a site that's primarily intended for its members, and it would restrict access from the general public, and it cannot be rented out for commercial uses or events held by the general public. Transportation staff has reviewed this site and did determine that the traffic generated by the proposed use will not overburden existing streets, and access to surrounding properties will not be affected. This proposed building would also provide an amenity to enhance the visiting experience for its members, programs, and camps, while also acting as a safety shelter when necessary. Conditions for noise and lighting have been proposed to ensure the proposed use remains compatible with surrounding development so as not to impede on the health, safety, comfort, or welfare of the public. Criteria 2, the specific proposed exception will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity and will not substantially diminish or impair property values in the neighborhood. The proposed use will not impact the neighbor's ability to utilize and enjoy their property, and the building is located approximately 778 feet from the nearest residential property line and buffered by existing woodlands. The proposed development is within an area that would allow development activity per the existing conservation easement agreement, and the vast majority of the property will remain open space, which serves as an amenity and benefit to neighborhood properties, which can have a positive impact on property values. The proposed development is also located in an area in the northeastern portion of the subject property that contains other existing structures of Harvest Reserve member use and do not have city-imposed limitations. There are conditions, however, recommended that will help mitigate potential negative effects on noise and hours of operation for the surrounding properties for the proposed construction. 3, establishment of the specific proposed exception will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district which such property is located. The residential neighborhood to the west is nearly fully developed with residential uses, and the residential neighborhood to the south is beginning to develop right now. Land to the north and east of the subject property remains undeveloped, and the development of this land will occur as the utilities extend and development continues from the west. And as mentioned, this property is set back over 778 feet from the existing residential neighborhood and is compatible in scale. And the conditions as recommended are intended to mitigate potential effects on surrounding properties. 4, adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and/or necessary facilities have been or are provided. The subject property has access to city utilities and will extend utilities to the property to serve the new building. An 8-foot wide sidewalk does exist along the property's North Scout Boulevard frontage, and there is pedestrian access for visitors of Harvest Reserve is also available through on-site trails. A large portion of the subject property is also green space, which does allow for the absorption of any stormwater runoff. Adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress or egress designed to minimize traffic congestion on public streets. Direct access to the new development will be off North Scott Boulevard through the existing curb cut and driveway. And transportation staff did determine that the existing drive was acceptable and the use as well as the existing parking would not overburden the streets or require improvements. Except for the specific regulations, standards applicable to the exception being considered, the specific proposed exception in all other respects conforms to the applicable regulations of the zone, and the proposed use and development does meet all the code standards for the IDRS zone. The proposed exception will be consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan and future land use map shows this area as conservation design, and the Northeast District Plan identifies this property as the Bluffwood neighborhood. The comprehensive plan notes that conservation design is appropriate in areas containing sensitive features and is meant to balance the protection of sensitive natural features with the development rights of the property owners. By clustering development on more buildable portions of the property, natural areas can be preserved. The proposed use and building would be located in the northeast corner of the property, away from those sensitive areas and in a designated buildable area per their conservation easement. The Northeast District Plan also has the goal to use conservation design principles to locate streets, utilities, and structures in a way that minimizes disturbance of natural features. And although the street network is already in place, in recent years, city utilities have been extended to a location that is more suitable to limit disturbance to natural features while providing the property with the property utilities. The Northeast District Plan goes on to note the goal to treat environmentally sensitive areas as amenities, and the Harvest Preserve Foundation has placed over 100 acres in a private conservation easement for the long-term protection of natural features with the intent of raising public awareness, appreciation, and participation. The proposed use and structure would provide an indoor space intended to further support and enhance the amenities of those who visit. Staff has received 23 pieces of correspondence in opposition of the proposed development as presented at the Good Neighbor meeting on May 29th of 2024. Since the Good Neighbor meeting, the applicant revised the site plan in response to neighbor concerns. Staff recommends approval of application EXC 24-0003, an application to allow a religious private group assembly use in an interim development single-family zone for the property located at 1645 North Scott Boulevard, subject to the following conditions. Condition 1, general compliance with the site plan dated 8/15/2024 in terms of the location of the building, parking, and the size and scale of the proposed building. 2, the building must be closed between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. 3, no amplified sound shall be allowed outdoors. And 4, future lighting be subject to the standards of 14.5G3, standards for single-family and two-family uses to ensure compatible lighting designs. That concludes the presentation, and I now turn it over to the board.
All right, any questions from the board to the staff?
I did have a question. Under general standards, 14.4B-3, number 1, you mentioned camps. Is that just those apparently are allowed in an activity in a
Yeah, my understanding from the applicant is those are like youth camps that have day trips there.
Okay, so this isn't like a jamboree.
No, these are private members or groups that are Harvest members that can have day camps there.
All right.
Yep.
Bryce, any questions?
No questions that I can think of.
All right, with no other questions, I'd like to ask the applicant to come forward, address the board.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Carrillo.
Be sure and sign in.
Sure. Hi, I'm Alex with Bedrock Builders. Do you want me to answer any questions, or what's a typical process?
Questions from the board?
I can give some background, I guess, to start. So I was approached by Julie Decker, Doug Paul with Harvest Preserve, with the idea of creating a building for what this purpose of this application is to support the programming for Harvest Preserve, to have an indoor space, have functioning restrooms that members of Harvest Preserve could use. So initially we looked at doing a building in this current spot, what the final application was. Then it became it became too cost prohibitive at the time to do the building in that location. So the idea was move it closer to where utilities have to come from, which is Tamarack Trail. So that's where it was revised to that location. And that's also where they have some of their current programming with their Taproot. Some of the day camps happen right where that chip and seal drive comes down. Yeah, go south to the, so right around there is where they already have some of their programming. So that was the idea of moving it there. We had a good neighbor meeting, lots of opposition. I think it was pretty clear that that was not the best location, despite the cost of doing it in another spot. There would have had to have been more parking, more paving if we did it there anyway. So fortunately, Harvest Preserve was workable, and they were okay with moving to this current location. So that's the backstory that I have for this.
Questions?
So it seems to me that there are just several possible areas of conflict, and one is, of course, parking, because in the letters that I read, one of the major concerns was spillover parking, and
Yeah.
that it would be on Tamarack Trail or whatever that is. That Tamarack Trail?
Yep.
So how do you address that, Alex?
Well, I think, I mean, the reality is it's not, I think the general intent of the building is for the current programming, for day camps, for members to rent, or if they want to reserve the space, not rent, but more reserve the space to do some club or activity, do a class or seminar or something that is on-site in Harvest Preserve. I think that's the most common use for it. So I think it's probably unlikely in its current spot that you're going to have people parking on Tamarack and walking a good distance and then going into Tamarack, into Harvest Preserve to get in. It's a nice walk, so I mean, I can't sit up here and say people won't park there, but I think it's very few scenarios where that would likely happen.
Well, certainly there's nothing to prohibit them from parking
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But it just it probably will raise a conflict eventually, right? So you have to be aware of that.
Sure. I know from all the construction on Tamarack, I know that one restriction is they put parking on one side of the street. So to that point, you wouldn't be allowed to have parking on both sides, so it's not going to congest both sides of the street if people follow the rule, of course.
Paula?
I don't have any questions right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else wish to speak for the application?
Hi, my name is Brock Heller. I'm with MMS Consultants on behalf of the applicant. I would just like to address some of your previous questions in terms of parking overflow. I think similar to what Alex said, the intended use for the parking area is 1/6 of the total occupant load. So that is based on the fire code with the allowable occupancy. So if you were to put 125 people in there, you couldn't exceed that amount. So that's not saying that it's proposed that 125 people are going to be in this use at one time, all of the time. It could happen, but there's also a through connection past the existing building, that there's an additional curb cut. I could foresee maybe if kids did have a camp, if there was like a pickup time, that might be a heavily parked situation for.
And where is that?
On the running south on the east side of the property from where the existing parking lot is. There's a gravel drive that goes down, and there's an additional curb cut just north of the existing tree line.
I see.
And so I could see a potential, this is all for Harvest Preserve to assess as, they see fit, but I could see a potential solution to like a pickup situation being queuing and stacking along that, just to avoid over parking in the limited existing parking lot. So if you have any additional questions of the site layout.
Just a management question. You have gates at all the entrances. Are those locked or closed 24 hours a day and only accessible by a code?
They are code accessible. I know that there are certain times that they'll have them up when they're expecting multiple guests to be arriving, but they are intended to be closed at all times.
Because the public cannot come and go.
Correct.
There will. Okay.
And there's a fence as well.
All right. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
So that, one last thing, so the distance from the building to, am I correct, to Tamarack Lane or whatever it is approximately 780 feet, is that it?
Yes, that's correct. To the property line, so the backyard of,
So that's slightly
Tamarack
less
Trail.
than a football field?
yeah.
Okay.
It's almost 2 football fields, isn't it?
No, 900 feet. Yeah, well, let's see, yeah.
2 football fields. Okay. And it's not visible to Tamarack, the location, the new
Correct.
location?
Correct. I could get the elevation difference,
That's
but it's located down a slope, and so the pond that's existing just west of the proposed site, it's closer to that elevation that sits down in a ravine. So, and it's wooded as well.
All right. Great, thank you.
It's almost 3.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak for the application? Anybody want to speak for or against, beginning with those in favor and then those opposed? Okay. Come sign in, introduce yourself.
Marcia Hammond, 1344 Tamarack Trail. I came here from the great state of Minnesota. Tim Walz was the governor when I was there. We have had a lot of conflict with this project, the initial project when we had the Good Neighbor meeting. We did a lot of petitioning with the neighbors to get their feelings and emails to Parker. I don't know, and you all received that as well. The questions that I still have for this project will be as follows. How many special exceptions are allowed on this property, for this property? How many?
At this point, just one. That's all that's being requested at this point is a special exception for this particular use.
I'm aware of that, but how many potentially?
Well, the site's limited based on the conservation easement, so the only buildable area is the areas that Parker shows in the hatching there. This is an IDRS zone, so only the uses that are allowed in that zone would be allowed on this property.
And that is why I bring this to your attention, because our homes are adjacent to that land that you just pointed out. All those properties have that, are right next to that fence line. And when we built these properties, we were told nothing is going to be built back there for 100 years. None of us knew, and silly us, we didn't have that in writing, did we? And neither did the builders. They were told similarly. Gary Frakes, Alex Grello, Rob Phipps. Those are the majority of the people that have built on that side of the road. That's a concern. Because what it leads to is this ambiguity. It's this building that will house these campers, yet what's the religious or spiritual component of this? And what is that? How many people will there be? Is it on a Sunday? Is it on a Wednesday? Am I against religion? No. But to congregate at that level, you will then impact Tamarack Trail parking. We have a very narrow road as it is. Each and every one of us, we have very narrow lots. We have city lot sizes. So if we were to have a mom and dad come over for Sunday brunch and they couldn't park in the drive but parked on the road across the street, you would take up rather probably 2 car lengths, or maybe three would fit on that. Then where are our parents supposed to park, or our sons and daughters and friends? And that is it's a deep concern, because in Minneapolis, I experienced some of this very same issue. And it makes you feel like you really can't live in your own space, because you don't know when there's going to be an overflow, so you can plan your Christmas party or your son's medical school graduation. So those are some concerns. I think the question I have also is this: the building is set down, and I know where it is, and there's some parking there, and there will probably be a turnaround in there. There already is. But if there are 21 car spaces, and it's in the middle of the winter because now we don't have any leaves on foliage. So how are those beams of light to come across? Do they? I don't know. That's why I call that ambiguity, because how do we know these things? We just wait and see. We wait until the thing is built, and then we, come to you all again and have this concern, but it's too late? We already built it? I mean, that is the big concern that many of us have had. And so I would really like you to, reconsider this, the parking, the amount of cars, what it's used for. It can be used for this camp, supposedly camp. But what is this religious group? What is it? When you take it out of residential and put it into this type of zoning, you've taken away, our rights to really ask what goes on. Because at this point, it's still residential 1, I think, RS or something like that, single family. Now you have multifamily, you have it continues on. How far does this go? That's why I ask, how many special exceptions? Because now you've got those 2 sites for possible special exceptions. And the impact that it would have on our, it would not increase the value of our property, I can tell you that right now. It would be an issue. And do we wait and see so we come back to you all? I mean, it has never been transparent. It has never, and that is the concern. Isn't that the biggest concern that we have right now in all of the issues that we have with whatever party you're in? That the transparency, we were not told. And do we not deserve that? Or do we wait and see? I'm not comfortable spending my hard-earned money to see that my property would be, this is my final resting place, hopefully. After 41 years of living in Minneapolis, I built this home down here. This is my final spot. And I don't want it to become devalued because we don't know. So something to think about, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else for or against the application? This time, the applicant is certainly free to respond to any of those issues that were raised, or if the board has any more questions, they should express them now.
So I would like a clarification, because in my mind, the requested action, the code lumps this request under the title, allow a religious/private group assembly. I would like clarification what that means. To me, there seems to be maybe a little confusion about lumping those two things together as they pertain to this application.
This is just the use that our code has. Religious private group assembly is just to classify private groups, so that could be more so on the religious focus like a church. This is more so on the club focus, similar to like an Elks Lodge type of format. It's just private groups that assemble at this type of space.
Okay, thank you.
But a church group could assemble in this space?
Yes, it could.
Okay.
If they were members, does that come into play?
They're essentially separate. It's called religious private group assembly because it includes churches, synagogues, or other community-minded membership organizations. It's because from a land use perspective, we can't treat these religious institutions any differently from other groups that gather and other membership groups that gather together in a space. They needed to be, from a land use and zoning perspective, needed to be treated the same way and allowed in the same way. We allow this use in single-family zones. If the board remembers a few months ago, the Porch Light group, that is a religious private group assembly of membership organizations that are all focused on literature and writing, and they are located in a single-family neighborhood. So these, from a zoning perspective, we need to treat a church the same way as we do this use that this membership organization, Harvest Preserve, is proposing.
Okay. Anything else? Mark?
Just for clarification, essentially this property is the same as the individual properties along Tamarack Lane, is that correct? It's sort of the same zoning, the same?
These are two different zones. So the one we're looking at, the Harvest property, is interim development, single-family residential. They have different development uses allowed.
Was Tamarack Lane that prior to its development?
Prior to its development, I believe it was zoned the same, and then when it was developed, it was rezoned and subdivided to the residential zone that it is now.
But your intention is to hold this project to the same lighting standards as Tamarack Lane is held?
Yes. Okay. Yep. So they would.
And what about gathering along Tamarack Lane? I mean, I don't know. Is it an HOA? Are there limitations? How many? Can you have a party, a yard party? Could you have 60 people at a yard party?
I don't know where they'll park.
Pardon?
I do not know where they would park.
I guess it's just a general question. I mean, are there limitations to that? If they wanted to have a party like that, could they have it?
Could the preserve have a type of?
No. Could the residents along Tamarack Lane have? Are they entitled to the same sort of?
I suppose they could. Yeah.
You know,
and from a zoning perspective, this use, religious private group assembly, is also an allowed use in the zones that as they are in, correct.
Okay. So a large private gathering along Tamarack would be subject to the same, not parking limitations legally, but just logistically. there's a certain number of public parking places for Tamarack and for the preserve. If people from the preserve use it, come overflow and use a public parking space on Tamarack, it's perfectly legal.
That's correct.
Right. Just like residents of Tamarack can park on that street perfectly legally. And
That's
if there's an overflow in the parking that park illegally, whether it's an event on Tamarack or an event in the preserve, there are remedies for the residents of Tamarack.
Correct.
Okay.
Now an okay time to...
You have to come up, microphone.
So I was just going to address one of the comments and clarify the location and the visibility. So kind of to what Brock was saying, I don't have the elevations, but I live on Tamarack. I make that walk a lot. You can't see any of the current buildings anywhere on Tamarack. And this would be at a lower elevation. And the intent is so there's the parking lot, you go down the hill to where the pond is, and where this building is proposed, we're proposing to build it into the side of that slope to make it a walkout. So I would anticipate there'd be no visibility. I've never seen a car light or any of the activity going on in Harvest Preserve from Tamarack. And I would anticipate that would continue to be the case. So I just want to clarify, I guess, what my interpretation of the visibility would be. So if there's any questions on that.
I have a question for Sue. I did read, and I can understand the sort of disappointment or dismay that some homeowners felt that, that they were led to believe there wouldn't be any development. That's not really an issue that we can address. Am I correct?
That's true, and it wasn't put into an easement until 2022, so presumably the development could have been a lot of different things. But in any event, that's right. That's nothing that the board can do or affect.
My point is that we have very, very limited sort of purview here.
But you need to know the history too. They're always.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
There's always history. There's a history to this.
Okay, you need to talk in the microphone.
There's a history to this, and the question I have is this. If you have this preserve, which you do, and you get these tax dollars, and you do, and they get they get a break, because they're a whatever they are, nonprofit, and so then their overflow comes up to the public parking, as you say, Tamarack Trail. So if we, as private property owners, have no public parking on Tamarack Trail because the overflow came into ours, what's our recourse? Can we go over to that parking lot and use it because they've used ours?
Could I just say something here, please? I live in an area in Iowa City where I'm impacted by home football games. People park on my public street in front of my house in that space. And when I have visitors that may be coming to my house to walk to the football game or enjoy it in my backyard or whatever, my parking is impacted, but it is public parking. And I don't have any control over that.
Well, this isn't a football stadium.
I can't hear you.
It's a public use.
This is not a football stadium. And the University of Iowa is completely different than Harvest Preserve. I beg to differ.
I don't understand this. I seriously do not understand this. We're talking about public parking. It's
Correct.
not your parking. It is public parking
correct.
up to a certain extent.
Correct.
Clearly marked.
Right.
Anybody can use it. And if they overflow into places they're not supposed to park, you can call a cop. But you have no control over who uses that public parking.
We have no recourse other than to call the police.
If they're parked illegally, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if there was a private party on your street, a high school graduation party or something, and they filled up all the spots and one of the kids parked illegally, call a cop. It's not a matter of who's using it from this preserve, it's a matter of the public using public parking the way they're supposed to.
More importantly, it's way out of our jurisdiction to
I can tell.
even address this.
I can tell.
It's just not the issue at hand.
I can tell.
I happen to live right across from, right next to a large grade school on the east side of Iowa City, and when they expanded and built a big addition, and the overflow parking is, they built a great big parking lot for the teachers, but it's not convenient for a lot of them to park there, so they park right along the street right in front of me, and it's just about impossible for me to back out. But I live on the east side of Iowa City, and it's just I grouse, but there's nothing I could do about it. So my sympathies, but again, it's sort of beyond our reach, I think.
I also think this is, with the change in location of the building from the original proposal to the new proposal, that the parking issue has been somewhat mitigated. It's much less likely to be a problem.
It's mitigated from the standpoint, I understand what you're saying, but the thing is, and I know that I just keep hammering away at it, and you're sick of hearing it, but I'm not. So I'm going to say it again. We don't know. We don't know how full that's going to be, do we? We don't know who's going to use it, other than the members and their 5,000 family members or whatever it is, 120. I mean, that's the thing. It's just we don't know, and that uncertainty leaves that bad taste in our mouth, and I will speak for my neighborhood, for the people that do have, written their emails and signed the petitions, that the transparency was lacking and the trust is minimal. That is it. And so we'll just have to go on good faith that it will work out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brock Heller with MMS Consultants. Some of the potential concerns with a lack of transparency, I think, could possibly be from the initial building permit application was filed not with the special exception use. It was just a building permit that was for staff review. And so through the process of that application, staff reviewed it, and based on what was being proposed, they said, we think this falls outside of the standard building permit application, and you would need to go through a special exception. So I think that some members of the neighborhood think that we were trying to slide this under their nose without, having a meeting before, but prior to the special exception going into place, it was just a simple building permit application.
But it was a building permit application for the other piece of the property, right, adjacent to Tamarack. That was your original application?
Yeah, which is in the same location now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so with public input, with neighborhood input, you changed the location?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So during the initial building permit application, it was required by city engineering to extend the public utilities to serve water and sewer to this building. And so because of that requirement, the existing building has septic and a water well. So our intention was to connect to the same water well and either expand the existing septic or install a new septic system. But because Tamarack Trail was extended from the dead-end street and connected all the way through to Scott Boulevard with that development, part of the public streets and infrastructure was put in place so that it made it accessible to attach to public. Even though there's not anything in the right-of-way in front of this property, it ends right at the Tamarack Trail line. Because it's close enough to that, city engineering required that we connect directly to it. And so that was when we shifted the building location to the northwest corner closest to the neighborhood, and then had the Good Neighbor meeting with that design. So then through the process of the Good Neighbor meeting and discussions with staff, we reverted back to the original location and basically just acknowledged that we'll have to extend approximately 900 to 1,000 lineal feet of public water main in Scott Boulevard in order to provide a water service to the building, as well as sanitary as well, that will need to be designed through the site plan portion of the application.
Great. All right. Thank you.
And just in terms of, is there screening involved in this? Are there special planting? Is there some sort of visual mitigation, or is it not necessary? Is sound mitigation, is that not necessary? Is there?
With this location, we don't believe any additional screening. There's existing landscaping and topography that's on the site.
That helps, I see.
Correct,
Okay.
yep.
Bryce, any questions?
No, I think the MMS consultant left it pretty clear. I mean, it is a burden on them to extend the water main and sewage, but I think they're trying to be as neighborly as possible.
Thank you. Mark, Paula, any more information that you need from anybody here? Thank you.
Yes.
Sure.
My name's Mike O'Donnell. I live at 1320 Tamarack Trail. I just wonder, are there any future plans in this plat behind the north end of the Tamarack on the east side? Are there any future plans of building there? And if there is, what, we have to go through this whole process every time they want to put another building in, right in our backyards on the other side of the fence?
As far as staff knows, there's no future plans, and there are other uses allowed in this zone that we would not go through a special exception process. They can move forward with your standard site plan application for administrative review.
Such as what
Yeah, such
types
as.
of?
What would those be?
Just a moment. So the uses they could build right now with administrative review would be detached single-family, animal-related commercial, and that would be things like a vet, animal grooming, animal daycare, kennels and stables. Parks and open space, other uses would be golf course, plazas, gardens, nature preserves, clubhouse and rec facilities, and then agriculture. That would be things like farming, plant nurseries, livestock operations, dairy farms, horse farms, and then some communication uses that would be allowed would be like broadcast towers and cell towers.
So that's the current law.
Yes, the
Things that can be
current use
done
is allowed.
without a review by this board.
Correct.
But there is a conservation easement in place, right?
Yeah, so the property's private conservation easement would limit them further than what these uses would allow.
That leaves that whole property pretty much wide open for whatever the hell they want to do.
I know they're limited by their conservation easement, but within their buildable areas, if their conservation easement would allow it, they could build some of these uses that are allowed.
So we could have farm animals on the other side of our fence in our backyard. technically, we could have that? Without any,
Sorry.
I think it'd be best to reach out to your neighbors and talk to Harvest Preserve about their intentions for development. Staff doesn't know what their vision is based on their website. They want this to be parks, open space, conservation. That is their goal, as shown in the conservation easement, and as you know, they are a 501c3.
all right. Not very reassuring.
Any other questions or comments? Questions for the staff?
Have you ever had anything like this before? Similar conflicts between, sort of the edge of development and
Yes.
Iowa City's full of that, isn't it? Probably.
Yeah.
Can I ask, where is that? I'm not from here, as I've said. I'm not from here, so I'd like to know where that is, so I could see it.
Tamarack Trail is
Well, we know that. But she said there's other ones.
Basically, any proposed development in the city, there's always neighborhood opposition to
Yeah, but
it.
Did they have a conservation Harvest Preserve trust? Did they have a trust? Did they have a conservation? Did they have private memberships? I mean, this is a very unique situation, I think. I didn't even see it in Minneapolis, as a big city.
It's my understanding the city is applying as much oversight as it's legally allowed to do on this issue.
Correct.
Okay. And future possible development is subject to the conservation easements, right? They can't just do everything
No.
that in the zone would ordinarily be allowed to do, that there are additional restrictions in place through the easement process.
That's correct, and maybe the applicant can speak more clearly on what those restrictions are, but there are private conservation easement restrictions, not enforced by the city.
But we can't make our parameters are very clear and distinct, and we can't speculate. And
No.
We can only deal
Neither
with
can
what
we.
we're presented with here. That's it. If it comes up again, you'll have to come back.
Great.
Thank you.
I don't want to spend my time.
I'm sorry.
I said, great, we don't want to spend our time doing this. We wanted to live peacefully. Thank you.
If no other questions or comments need to be applied towards the staff or applicant, I'm going to close this public hearing and ask for a motion.
Is this the motion you want here? Motion to preserve?
Yeah, whatever the,
I'll make the motion.
move the approval based on all these things here.
I'll make the motion. We need a second, I guess.
Sure.
A second.
Second?
Okay. Do we get, you have to
Yeah, state
read
the
the motion
motion.
out loud.
Okay, we're in the motion.
I move the approval of
Okay.
that there, start,
I'm-
that whole thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I move that we approve the staff approval of EXC 24-0003 to allow a religious private group assembly use in an interim development, single-family residential zone for the property located at 1645 North Scott Boulevard, subject to the following conditions. General compliance with the site plan dated 8/15/2024 in terms of the location of the building, parking, and the size and scale of the proposed building. The building must be closed between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. No amplified sound shall be allowed outdoors. Future lighting shall be subject to the standards of 14.5G-3, standards for single-family and two-family uses to ensure compatible lighting designs.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Board discussion?
I have a question.
I have a question because
Chair-
I want to know
No,
this.
ma'am, the-
I'm not
the
from here.
public hearing is
Oh,
closed.
it's closed?
It's closed.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Board discussion?
Well, I certainly understand the concerns of the neighbors. In my time on Planning and Zoning Commission and on the board, I've learned one thing, and that is that unless you actually own the property, you don't have control over what may possibly happen to it. I just needed to say that. People can promise all kinds of things, but unless it's in writing, boards, especially boards like this, don't have any jurisdiction over that. I think that moving the site plan to the other part of the area it goes a long way in appeasing the concerns of the neighborhood, which are very valid to have instead of that in your backyard. I think the wooded area, the topography will help mitigate the concerns. And no amplified sound outside will also help things. The lighting, I guess, single-family and two-family uses to ensure compatible lighting designs. I guess I'm a little confused still on how lighting a parking lot blends into a single-family use. But they would have to meet the standards as far as lumens and shielding and all of those kinds of things. So, and I think it's far enough away at over close to 780 feet that it wouldn't be impactful.
I would agree, and also state that I think that that you're in pretty good hands here in terms of the project managers have shown, I think, a willingness to discuss and try to meet your requests and concerns. And I think that'll be ongoing. I can't imagine why anybody wants a conflict over this. I think that you have a wildlife, essentially a wildlife area with a 100-year easement behind you that I think is, everybody values, and I think it'll be continually valued. So, if we were dealing with the first location, you'd be hearing different things from this board, I believe. But I think that, again, I think staff and the project managers are in your court in a way. So I have great faith in this moving forward and any issues being resolved.
Bryce?
No, I totally concur with that assessment. The first location, or I assume the second location because it moved back to the original location, but 1,000 linear feet of sewer and water are not cheap to put in, so they're trying to be as neighborly as possible. And I think the site elevations worked in the favor of the neighbors, as in light pollution, noise pollution, unsightly buildings. So I think this is the best solution for all parties. Yeah, it's not perfect for everyone, but I think it's something that is doable for how the easement is set up for. That's all.
Great, thank you. And I agree with the rest of the board on this. I think this current location is a vast improvement over the original location, and that a lot of the concerns understandable concerns, will not develop the way, in a worst-case scenario. I just don't see this as being a problem for the neighborhood. Anyway, so at this time, we need to have a findings of fact.
Okay, regarding EXC 24-0003, I concur with the findings set forth in the staff report of August 22nd, 2024, and conclude that the general and specific standards are satisfied. Unless amended or opposed by another board member, I recommend that the board adopt the findings and the conditions in the staff report for the approval of this application. Again, just to state, I think that the findings have satisfactorily addressed the criteria for the use in this zone, changing the zoning, and especially setbacks, building scale, parking location, all of those things.
Great, thank you.
I second.
I agree as well. Okay. Information furnished, findings of fact established. I'd like to call for a vote.
Baker,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Carlson, Russo,
Yes.
Swigert,
Yes.
Motion is approved. Any person desiring to appeal this decision to a court of record may do so within 30 days after this decision is filed with the city clerk's office. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda is the consideration of the discussion of the bylaws.
Well, perhaps I'll just start. It was brought up to have a discussion about whether the board should be able to nominate and elect a person who is not present at that meeting. And so, as my memo said, there's a couple of options. One option would be that a member who's not present cannot be nominated at all, or you could nominate somebody, and that person could then promptly notify staff, who's the secretary, that they decline, and then another election would occur at the next meeting. So those would be the two options. Again, the third one would be just a slate that you find with maybe larger boards where they have a nominating committee and they say they've talked to Tom and Jane and they agree to be president and vice president, and so then the vote is just for the slate, Tom and Jane. But with only 5 folks, and you'd have a 2-person nominating committee, and odds are one of them would have to be an officer, doesn't seem to be very a good approach. So it would seem that you'd have those other 2 options: either you can't do it at all, or similar with, as Robert's Rules provides, that you could nominate and elect, and then the person promptly would notify staff that they didn't want to serve, and then we'd have the election again at the next meeting. So. And I'll turn it over just to staff's discussion.
So just very
Board
quickly.
discussion, sorry.
It's, this can be resolved under the existing Robert's Rules of Order.
Right, right. This just clarifies
Okay, great.
what Robert's Rules would provide, yes.
Okay, thank you. Discussion?
Does staff have a preference or any thoughts about, because the second option would require staff involvement. And so I just wondered what your thoughts were about that.
no concerns from staff.
Is no concerns the same thing as no preference?
No preference from staff.
Okay.
I guess my only concern about the second option, it's still a little bit vague as far as the word promptly, what is that? And I just, you know, because I guess because I'm the one that sort of brought this up and was the one that experienced it. I think there are different circumstances that a nominated, an elected member might be personally experiencing that would maybe still make the second option less desirable. I would lean towards the first option.
Okay, the first option is the existing Robert's Rules of Order? That's what I'm reading as the first option.
No, the first option is a member who is not present may not be nominated.
Oh, I see.
So you might get a whole bunch of no-shows during that meeting.
My preference is to let Robert's Rules of Order stand here, which is if the person does not want it, to decline it, and we'll make it up the second, do it over again. I mean, without having to go through a change of regulations. It seems that that is a perfectly viable solution to the problem, if there's a problem.
Well, her issue is...
Do we need to define timeline, as in before the next meeting or something?
If the person, on that first option, if the person declines the agenda for the next meeting would include a new election. So it has to be done at the next meeting. The person has to decline.
Correct.
And then.
Before the next meeting.
Before the next meeting, because the person will be contacted, and then will be done over again, would start over again at the next meeting. City staff will be assigned to notify the person promptly of the nomination, and the person should either accept or decline the nomination. And if the person declines, the agenda for the next meeting would include a new election. That's currently the rule as of now, correct?
That's how Robert's Rules has it. This is just more explicitly stating what Robert's Rules is.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I get a TikTok from Sue notifying me that I'm elected to a position? Can I put that in the recommended change?
You want a TikTok?
I don't know how to do it.
Is that prompt enough?
But, I mean, I use the word promptly because I didn't want to use 48 hours or 72 hours. We could have a Wednesday meeting and staff could be gone for till the following Monday. I think promptly means...
And we only meet once a month,
Right.
so there's plenty of time.
Right. That's certainly up to
So
the board.
Sue, you're saying you do not have a TikTok account. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, let the record reflect. I do not have a TikTok
I have an
account.
OnlyFans account.
Is the second option a change in that it assigns the secretary to do this? As opposed to our original? Because I felt there was some confusion as to who was supposed to do the notification.
There's nothing in it now. What
Okay.
I chose to do was just notify the clerk
Okay.
so they could put it on the website. That's all, just that. That's what led to that. That and Parker being relatively new to the position.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
again, under the existing regulations, do we need to change anything to make the existing Robert's Rules of Order applicable? Or is it automatically applicable that if someone is nominated who's not here, the secretary will notify that person? Do we need to put that in writing, or is that in writing somehow?
Robert's Rules doesn't say the secretary will notify. It just made sense the secretary is city staff, and the city staff would reach out.
Robert's Rules of Order does say that the person should be notified.
Yes.
Okay. Everything else is pretty much common sense. Okay. Once again, I apologize for any confusion or whatever that would have occurred in the past, but I really don't see a change in the bylaws being necessary.
Well, without putting this in writing, in our bylaws, a person who is new to the board and is elected to a position would not find it in our bylaws, would have to, and if they weren't notified, would have to dig back into Robert's Rules of Order, which is what I did because it was not spelled out in our bylaws.
I'm working under the assumption here that the understanding is that that person, we didn't, how did you find out that you would?
By watching it on City Channel 4.
Okay. How, at the meeting, at the time of the meeting or afterwards?
Afterwards.
Okay. Did you contact staff at all?
Yes.
Okay.
The following Monday,
Okay.
late in the day on the following Monday.
And did you tell them that you were declining?
No. I accepted. My complaint, my problem is that I wasn't notified in any way. I didn't know what the rules were. That's my problem. Okay, so I'm elected, right? What are my options? How do I find out what my options are? Do I have to accept it? Can I decline it? If so, how do I do that? What's the time frame?
Okay, once again, the questions that Paula just raised, they are or are not answered in the current rules.
Well, they're answered insofar as Robert's rules apply, but it doesn't spell it out in our current procedural rules. It just refers you to Robert's rules. So unless you look up Robert's rules as to what happens when you are nominated and you are not and elected and you are not present, you would not easily understand that you could decline, for example.
So do we have to formalize the notice requirement? I mean, if Paula had not seen it on television, would she have been notified before the next meeting?
I would assume so, but I don't know that. I would assume somebody would have, but maybe not. She may have seen it in the draft minutes when you got the packet. I don't know. I think staff tries to reach out always and inform people. But
Okay. Paula, tell us what you want to do.
Either one is fine. But I would like it spelled out in our bylaws what an elected person's options are if they're not here. That's all. Either one of these works fine, but just put it in the bylaws so you don't have, so that if something happens and you aren't notified for some reason, whether it's oversight, new personnel, for whatever reason, because we all just, screw up sometimes or whatever, and it just, so you don't have to keep digging backwards to figure out what your options are. That's all.
So on page 2 of the staff report, in the second red ink, one of the options is under section 2, except as provided herein, the secretary must promptly notify a member elected to an office. If the member was not present, the member must notify the secretary is accepted or declined. So what I'm hearing is put that in section 2.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, that works for me. I'm always keen to do the TikTok thing, sue. But
We might go viral here.
I don't.
Somebody make a motion.
Okay, I'll make it. I move to modify Article 3, Section 2, to include nomination with election and term of office, with the wording, "The secretary must promptly notify a member elected to an office if the member was not present at the meeting. The member must notify the secretary whether the nomination is accepted or declined, and if declined, election for that office will be placed on the agenda for the next meeting."
Second? Any discussion?
I can second.
Any more discussion? If not, call for a vote. Is it a voice vote? Or just yea or nay, or roll call vote?
Voice is fine.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? Passes 4-0. Next up on the agenda is consideration of the meeting minutes from April the 10th. We don't meet very often, do we?
It has been
I
a
get
long time.
appointed, elected chair, and you just quit having meetings. Okay. April the 10th, 2024.
I have no corrections or anything.
I don't have any changes.
No changes.
Okay. Accept the meeting, minutes, motion?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 I just want to point out, I don't think that the chair should be making motions on anything. Okay, that's why I'm looking around for y'all.
That was changed.
It was changed?
Yeah, that, 4 or 5 years ago.
Amy wanted to vote.
Right, and so,
So it's possible for the chair to make a motion?
yes.
Okay, I'm just going to go on the record. I'm not making any motions. The board's going to have to make the motions, okay? That's just my personal feeling of what the role of the chair ought to be.
I have something, Parker, I can't be here the 11th.
I'm not sure that we have a meeting scheduled for that date. That's just the next one that would be.
Once again, no meeting since I get to be the chair. It's
All right.
like you people knew something.
No, we can take care of that again
Okay,
next
let's have a
year.
meeting.
You can meet here.
Oh, I'll be here, yeah, okay. Any,
We can have another
I'll be in,
election.
yeah, I'll be in Hawaii.
you'll be here?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I have something for Board of Adjustment information if nobody else does. And I was going to raise this, I was expecting a different kind of meeting tonight. I was expecting a full house based upon a plan that was initially proposed. And one of the questions I wanted to raise, but I'll raise it here in general, is that, and part of the findings of fact or the staff review, there's a discussion of how the application will affect property values. And this is a quote. It says, the development, quote, will not substantially diminish or, and I'm assuming that implicit is substantially impair property values. So my question is this language that by law recognizes that property values might indeed be impacted negatively but still be acceptable?
I can issue a memo to the board for that. There can't be any discussion on that tonight because it's not on the agenda.
I'm just talking about the
No, I
law in
understand
general.
that. I'll provide you a written response at the next packet.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Bryce, you got anything other than TikTok stock you're trying to sell?
No, I just want Sue's TikTok. I don't want y'all's. I just want Sue to blast it out on social media, but I have nothing for the group.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, thank you very much. Move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
That's what I said.
Second.
Oh, we're done?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, all those in favor say
Aye.
aye.
You work quick.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.